And welcome back to Jeff Koinange Live here at Citizen Television. Today we'll talk about law and society. And there's a lot of concern from people out there. Cases being dropped left, right, and center. What's going on? Especially high-level cases, literally being dropped. And the local ordinary Monanchi is asking, what about us? The guy who steals the chicken and gets 20 years? That's not very fair. In the studio today, we're talking to the president of the Law Society of Kenya, Eric Theuri. Mr. President, is that what they call you?
Yes,
they do.
You're learning very fast.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
So,
much.
These cases, even as of today, Joe Sang, former MD, Kenya Pipeline Company, him and 5 others, case dropped.
No, actually, that is a judgment by the court where it found that there was no evidence against them, which is really extremely disheartening when the court makes the kind of comments that it made, that it sat through an entire case for several years and there was no credible evidence against the accused people. Essentially, what the court is saying is that it presided over an injustice. And we are having a big challenge when it comes to prosecution of cases. And of course, as you are rightly saying, there is concern in terms of some of these cases that are being withdrawn.
Yeah.
But I think maybe a little bit of context is necessary, because the criminal trial process does not end the moment someone takes plea. The prosecution and the investigators have a duty to continue to investigate, and in the course of the investigations, sometimes new evidence may come out, or a witness who had given testimony in a particular way can change their mind, or can say something that changes the course of the prosecution.
Yeah.
And then the prosecutors would have to decide whether they can continue with the case in those circumstances or otherwise. So we find ourselves in a very interesting situation where we see some cases being dropped. We see a situation where the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Director of Criminal Investigations for quite a while have had tension and friction because of the refusal to institute certain cases. So we look at all this and we are extremely worried about the institutions that are within the justice sector, not just the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, but also the investigators. And the other day as a society, what we did, we asked some of our members, because there's been a lot of concern with how some of the cases relating to land fraud have been handled, especially high-value land cases. And Jeff, the feedback that we have gotten from our lawyers, from our members, on some of the cases that are being handled, where you find that even a legitimate owner of a property someone would go and create a fake title, and they would get it validated by the document examiner. So that is the kind of malpractice that has pervaded some, and we're not saying all, but we're saying these are some of the malpractices.
And it's still going on?
Well, you see, unfortunately, there's been a change in the office, and then there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak. And so one of the other things we would want to see is how is he going to set up his shop Is he going to clean shop? Is he going to bring in a new ethos in terms of competent investigations? Because that is where it begins and it falls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of the new sheriff in town, the president last week said he's not out to control the judiciary. Your thoughts?
I would want to say that currently the judiciary is under trial. It's under trial because when you have a new administration, you are keen to see how it will relate with other institutions, be it parliament, be it the judiciary, be it the other independent constitutional commissions that have been set up, because our structure, our architectural structure of the Constitution creates sort of a fourth arm of the government in the independent institutions. So you want to see how the president relates with those institutions, because we all appreciate that the exercise of executive power is a restrained power, and the institutions that then restrain, key among them is the judiciary. And then so when the other thing I want to say is that when it comes to the administration of justice, it is not just the independence of the judiciary that is important. The perception of independence is equally important. And that's why the maxim always goes that justice is done and seen to be done. Because if then the perception of the ordinary members of the public, and we are not just saying ordinary, but we are using the standard of the right-thinking members of the public, is that the judiciary is perceived to be closer to the executive than it should be, then it waters down the independence, the confidence that the members of the public have in the judiciary.
Yeah.
So where we are right now is at a state where we are watching this relationship. It is a developing relationship, but it is showing signs of a rather uncomfortable, close relationship. We understand that the judiciary and the executive cannot work in isolation. There is an element of interdependence. But when the relationship is too cozy, then it creates concerns that the judiciary then would be unable to check the executive.
Yeah, look, for example, I mean, look, cases being dropped, and we talked about this earlier. Look at this Theuri rape case dropped. Aisha Jumwa's murder case dropped, and she becomes a state witness. I mean, Rigathi Gachagwa's case dropped. I mean, I could go on and on. What's going on?
It's something that, to be quite honest, concerns us a great deal. You might be aware that we did have a meeting with the Director of Public Prosecutions, and we had a very long and lengthy discussion around this area. One, of course, we appreciate that he is independent, but he was open enough to come and talk to us and express to us some of these challenges. Then again, we are not strangers in Jerusalem, so to speak, because we defend most of these clients. And we know that for quite a considerable period of time, there are cases that were taken to court that ought not to have been taken to court. That there are cases that are in court that have glaring gaps in terms of the evidential burden. And when we had this meeting with the DPP, and he was showing us correspondence where they've been writing to the DCI saying, we have gaps in this, you are supposed to cover this gap. You are supposed to do this, you are supposed to do this. And you do not have that feedback in terms of, yes, now we have covered, yes, you told us to fill this part of the gap in evidence, we have covered it. So that created a problem for us. And what we saw at a particular time is that our fears that there had been weaponization of the criminal justice process, it actually became apparent when we looked at that. And remember, it got so bad that even the Law Society, through the former President Harvey, had to go to court to stop a process for removal of the DPP because the DPP now had refused to play the games that certain quarters had wanted him to play. And for me, that is where we have concern, because if you have investigators who are actually supposed to investigate to prevent crime, and they themselves are perpetuating crime, then it becomes extremely dicey. I remember one of the things which we came to our attention is that previously there was an affidavit by an investigator who was saying, you know what, I was pushed to do ABCD. I was not yet ready, but I was pushed to do this. And so I presented a file, and I was able to convince the DPP that I have enough evidence, charge this person. The other gaps, I am closing on them. I will bring you, the reports and all those kind of things. And then much later withdraws and says, this is, I was forced to do that. So you look at those situations and they are very troubling, so to speak. And then, as I've told you, all these reports that we are getting about the people using the criminal justice process to dispossess other peoples of their property, to fight businesses, because there are businesses which have been closed through, the weaponization of either taxes and all those kind of situations. So we have a country that sometimes almost feels like a wild, wild west in terms of once you get to understand the challenges that we are facing. And I think for us then it becomes a concern, an extremely big concern, one in terms of how the criminal justice system works, and secondly, when you are seeing the courts appearing to be extremely cozy, because then the courts become the last line of defense. Yeah. If that last line is weakened,
then we're doomed.
That's why I didn't want to conclude that sentence.
I read your lips. Yes. I read your lips. Yes. We are doomed. And yet, some people say the LSK is very silent on all this. Is it because you've been busy putting your house in order the last 7 months? Because, you came in under a very tumultuous time.
No, not quite. Not quite. Sometimes the challenge that you are facing dictates how you will respond to the issue that is before you. What we are dealing with is a crisis within the justice sector that, if not handled properly, is likely to snowball. And you know what it means when people get the feeling that they cannot get justice before the court. Yeah. So that's one of the things that we are looking at. Two, we've had immediately the new director of the DCI came into office. I think we were the first to meet him. We had a discussion with him, and there are certain parameters in terms of certain issues which we discussed with him and agreed. These are the bare minimums in terms of what should be happening. And that is an ongoing discussion. And we hope that we'll also have that discussion with the the new IG. We were actually supposed to have a meeting with him, but you remember there was a time there was quite a bit of security issues, so our meetings kept on falling off.
Right.
We've also had extensive discussions with the Director of Public Prosecutions, and we have agreed that the benchmark in terms of instituting prosecutions should be as guided by the decision to charge guidelines, which they have developed. One other thing that we'll be doing is that in some of these high-profile cases, we've actually had an opportunity to review the files and the reasons for withdrawal of those cases. There are some which we have looked at and we feel there may have been some satisfactory reasons as to why those cases were dropped. There are others which we are still reviewing. And there are other cases which we intend to appoint an advocate to watch, brief on behalf of the public, so that we are able to, because you've noticed that also, that there have been 1 or 2 appointments that have been done of people who have cases that are ongoing before court.
Yeah.
And for those cases, we are now saying we will ensure that we appoint an advocate to just watch over the public interest to ensure that those cases, people do not use their appointments to defeat the justice system.
But that's what it looks like it's happening. That's what it looks like they are doing. They're using their appointments to mask or to cover up whatever cases they have.
It's a very legitimate concern because look at it this way. The other day, the president appointed the former governor, Babayao, when there are very clear constitutional provisions that once impeached, you cannot hold public office. That is a consequence of impeachment. But he goes ahead and makes the appointment. 2 or 3 high-profile appointments that have been made, there are people who are facing high-profile cases before the courts. So you get the feeling that it's a way to, foolproof themselves, so that they are using the executive appointments to foolproof themselves. And here we have to say it, the president has failed in terms of Chapter 6. And it's to a certain extent, and I say this because when the president appointed the principal secretaries, we went to court and we challenged that decision. Now that is a case, for us, is really a question of numbers, because the Constitution says not more than 1/3 should be of the same gender. This is an appointive. It's different when it is elective, because people elect and you might not have a formula to ensure that the 1/3 is met because it's election. But on appointive, this is what the Constitution requires. We go to court and the court says, stop this process, which is okay, so that we hear this petition. And then eventually, what does the court come and say? That this matter is not yet ripe. So in constitutional litigation, when there is a threat, you stop it from happening. But you don't say it is not ripe because the threat has not occurred.
So how does that make you feel as the LSK? Do you feel, what's the word, helpless?
We are not entirely...
Toothless?
We are not entirely helpless. We are not entirely toothless. Because, you see, what the Law Society stands for is principle. And the principle doesn't change. It doesn't change. It is a bit frustrating because you expect that the courts would be at the forefront of saying that these are well-enshrined constitutional principles, and we should err on the side of protecting the Constitution, that their primary responsibility is protecting the Constitution. And let's look at it this way. The president is probably 3 or 4 months old in office. I mean, the ink upon which he used to sign the constitutional oath that he took has not yet dried. But what has been his actions? Even before the ink has dried, he has taken not 1, not 2, but 3 or 4 clearly unconstitutional decisions, unconstitutional appointments, or appointments that violate the question of ethics and integrity. And so, if you are then to juxtapose that and say if it's 3 months, then in 2 years, 3 years, what are we looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very bizarre in some cases, but the thing is, very few are questioning. That's the problem. Very few are questioning. Nobody's making any noise. Appointments come, they're made, nobody's questioning. And then on top of that, Wafula, who steals a chicken, gets 20 years in jail, and nobody's out there to talk on Wafula's behalf. Hold that thought. We'll take a break.
Thank you.
After the break. Very interesting stuff, folks. A lot happening in the judiciary, a lot happening at the Law Society of Kenya, a lot happening around you. You should question as well. What are your thoughts? At Koinange Jeff.